How you doing, guys? Big Mac Downscore here again. How you doing, guys? Big Mac Downscore here today, back once again with another episode of my Conquest series for you. Today, we're going to be taking a look through the pages of issue 73. First off, before we get started, I just want to do a quick call out to my Patreon for you. I set it up last week, so far I've got no patrons. It's okay, it's not the end of the world. But I want to remind you, if you do want to watch my Mortal Realms series, then I'm going to need to get some support on the Patreon in order to pay for the Mortal Realms magazines after issue 4. I'm happy to pay for the first 4 myself, and then if I can get enough money to pay for 3 out of 4 magazines every month, then I'm happy to continue the series. But if I can't get £24 every month, basically, then I won't be continuing that series. It won't go as long into the run as this Conquest series has. This Conquest series is going to go right to the end. The reason being is just that I'm not into Age of Sigmar and I'm not looking to get into Age of Sigmar. But if enough people want the content and are willing to pay for it, then I'm more than happy to cover Mortal Realms and learn more about the fantastic lore that's in Age of Sigmar. But the truth be told as well, neither of the armies really do it for me, so even if I was looking to get into Age of Sigmar, it wouldn't be an ideal magazine for me to buy. Anyway, back on with Conquest. What do we get in this week's issue of Conquest? We get 2 paints. So we get Nihilic Oxide and Nurgle's Rot. That's £5.50 in total. Magazine £7.99, so we do lose a bit of money this issue. Not the end of the world though, because it's got a lot of rich lore and some exciting stuff that I wasn't expecting, if I'm honest. The other content is discover Imperial Knights and use stratagems for your games, plus more. Turning to the first page, what do we get? Oh, it's Imperial Knights. We get a lovely image of an Imperial Knight, House Terran Imperial Knight here. And it just talks you through the role they play within the Imperium and on the battlefield. It doesn't delve really into night worlds or anything, which I thought it might do, although I suppose we've touched on them in the past with the worlds of the Imperium. I think that's what the section was called that we've had in previous issues. So yeah, turning to the next page, we've got 3 knight pilots here represented. One is Lady Karina Griffith, one is Sir Tadwin of House Boros, and Sir Hector the Chainbreaker. Sir Hector is the last of his house, and as is the Imperial Knight that he pilots. He was captured by the Iron Warriors, and he managed to escape from his imprisonment, get back to his knight, and free a load of prisoners along with him. So he's quite famous as not a renegade. What did they call them? As a free lancer? A free blade. He's quite a famous free blade. That's an Imperial Knight who goes off on their own for whatever reason. Quite often it's because the rest of their house has been destroyed. So yeah, that's Sir Hector's story for you there. There's a quote here from Lady Karina Griffith.
I have fought across a score of worlds in the Emperor's name. I have slaughtered traitors, Xenos and heretics for the honour of my house. I have known glorious victory and painful defeat. Yet I shall never tire, never cease and never relent, for ours is a duty that will never end.
Whoa! Sends a chill down your spine, doesn't it? Anyway, on to the next page, we get an Imperial Knight showcase, some lovely miniatures to be seen, and we get a full look at Sir Hector here. Sir Hector, the Knight Preceptor kit, I think it is, comes with a Sir Hector miniature. One thing you might want to buy that kit for, though, is because you can take that miniature, lop off his head, lop off his head, and swap it for another head. If you look at the armour on the Lady Karina Griffith artwork, it doesn't have the boob plate that you see on like Sisters of Battle and other female warriors in the 40k universe. So it just has a typical chest plate. So you could easily just swap that for a female head if you wanted to represent Lady Karina Griffith. Although there are no rules for her in game, there are for Sir Hector. If his knight gets destroyed, he can become a model on foot, basically. So yeah, if you wanted to represent the leader of your House of Knights, or a particular hero in your House of Knights, you could easily just swap that head out for another head. I myself could use a Space Wolf head, get one with a big beard and a bald head, and use that to represent myself on the battlefield if I wanted to pilot an Imperial Knight. Fantastic stuff. On to the next page, we get Space Marines Codex Heraldry. Now, we've had a fair bit on Codex Heraldry before, so I was surprised this was in here. However, it goes into a little bit more detail, explaining that the Ultramarines are 100% Codex compliant, and various other chapters aren't so Codex compliant, but there's variations to the various themes, the various markings that you can have and still be considered Codex compliant. It talks first about ranks, and it gives you good examples of Battle Brothers, Sergeants, Veterans, Veteran Sergeants, Lieutenants and Captains, and the variations between the two. The Sergeant is one with the red helm, Veteran Sergeant is one with the red helm with a white stripe. Lieutenant has your helm the same colour as your armour, as the rest of your Marines, but it's got a white stripe with a red stripe within it. And then the Captain's helm is back to a solid colour, whatever is appropriate for your chapter, but with a skull emblem on the forehead just set above the eyes there. On to the next page. Companies. So we've got more indication of what companies use what colours, wear what colours on their shoulder trim. And yeah, like I said, we've seen some of this stuff before, so it's surprising to see it again, I think. But then below there, we've got battlefield roles and a few variations on the battlefield roles. So the battle line units, for example, the Imperial Fists have an upward pointing arrow as the battle line marker on their units. However, the Dark Angels have a double-ended arrow. Ooh, double-ended. Have a double-ended arrow going horizontally across the shoulder pad. And then the Elites, you can have a Crux Terminatus, or the outline of a Crux Terminatus. Close support may have a X-shaped double-ended arrow, so a quadruple arrow throwing star type thing. Or you can have that in a circle. And then for fire support, you can have almost like an alpha symbol or an explosion symbol. And for command, you have typically a skull or a skull in a circle, something like that. And Space Marine Infiltrators are on the next page. They snuck into these pages like little devils, like covert operators, because there's absolutely nothing about them on the front cover. And guess what? They were released after the magazine launched, so I was not expecting to see anything about these new Vanguard units within the pages of Conquest. So this is thoroughly exciting for me. I got to learn a little bit about them, and I'll share a little bit with you. The type of unit they are is light infantry, and they are Vanguard, so they're at the forefront of the fighting. They are who you send in first to disrupt the enemy lines. Their battlefield role is battle line, which I did not know about infiltrators because I've not picked up the Space Marine Vanguard Start Collecting set yet. I think that's what it's called, the Primaris Vanguard Start Collecting set. The specialisms are stealth tactics. Ooh, sneaky devils sneaking into the pages like that. Anti-infantry combat, sabotage, infiltration, or they infiltrated these pages alright. Reconnaissance and assassination. I hope they're not going to assassinate me. On to the next page, we get a few more pictures of the infiltrators, and we get to learn a little bit about the Helix Adepts as well. Helix Adepts are Space Marines who receive additional training from the Apothecarian. They stand ready to ascend to the rank of Apothecary when a new one is needed. Meanwhile, they practice their craft in the Vanguard formations using their medical skills to tend to their allies. So they're a battlefield medic without having the full rank of Apothecary. And it makes total sense to have them in the Vanguard forces, in the Infiltrators, because the Infiltrators are essentially, in my mind, it's not confirmed, but they are what's going to replace Scouts. These Vanguard units are probably what's going to replace Scouts in in the lore of the Warhammer 40,000 universe, assuming old Marines are eventually shuffled to one side and dropped from the product line that Games Workshop sell. Next page we get Space Marine Incursors. Whoa! More stealthy infiltration units sneakily getting into the pages. Unbelievable. We get a lovely bit of artwork here of some Blood Angels infiltrators. And again, I'll read through the type of unit they are for you. So they're light infantry and vanguard, very much like the infiltrators. Close support battlefield role rather than battle line. Their specialisms are stealth tactics, anti-infantry combat, sabotage, infiltration, reconnaissance, and mine laying. So the only difference is they're not assassination specialists; they are mine laying specialists. So they are able to carry haywire mines, and they can disperse them amongst the enemy vehicles and stuff, clamp them onto the side, but, well, I don't know about clamping them onto the side actually, they're proximity mines, so if an enemy vehicle passes over the mine or something, then that could be kaput. Onto the next page, we get how to paint Death Guard details. Oh, look at this! We've got 2 new paints in this, so I was expecting a little bit of a painting guide. We go back to the Rakarth flesh and pick out certain areas, dry brush on Felthius' cloak, for example. A few highlights on any wooden areas on the Death Guard miniatures. There's a surprising amount of wooden areas on these high-tech futuristic Marines, but it fits with the Death Guard aesthetic, so I really appreciate that. Onto the next page, we get weathering bronze. What paint might we use for that? Well, have you ever seen weathered bronze or copper out in the world? You might see it on, like, I can't think where you'll see it now, but if you go no, that's iron. Like on domed roofs, sometimes they have a bit of bronze or brass or copper on them. And instead of rust, what you get on iron is rust, and it's all orangey and stuff. But basically, the oxidization of copper and bronze and brass, you get a bluey sort of look to it. And with the Death Guard miniatures, if you painted them bronzy, brassy, coppery, the metallic details on them, then you can really use this nihilic oxide paint to pick out, like, make them look extra grimy, dirty, rusty. Not rusty, but oxidized. And then onto the next page, we get slime, pus, and plasma. We get a little red plasma painting tutorial, which you won't be seeing behind you because I've just remembered the pictures I've taken don't include that. But we do get to paint some slime effects here with Nurgle's Rot. Nurgle's Rot is like quite a translucent paint. So if you paint it over something that's been coloured green, it'll just look green. But then if you paint it over another colour that's got a few different shades to that colour, like the base, for example, it gives you here, you could paint it on a base of a Death Guard miniature, so it looks like as the Death Guard is marching along, Plague Marine in particular, as a Plague Marine is marching along, bits of slime and goop are dripping off his armour onto the floor. Onto the next page, we get Space Marine stratagems. These are basically some new Space Marine stratagems that we can use for a varying amount of command points. I'll just go through one of them for you. The Auspex Scan. The Auspex Scan allows Space Marines to fire at units arriving on the battlefield through abilities such as Teleport to Strike, though at a -1 to hit. During Max's movement phase, he decides to deploy his Blightlord Terminators using the Teleport to Strike ability. He deploys them 9 inches from Sam's intercessors. Max's Terminators have been deployed within 12 inches of Sam's intercessors, so she opts to use the Auspex Scan stratagem. She reduces her command points to 2 so they can fire. So the Auspex Scan stratagem costs 2 command points, so that's why you reduce your command points by 2. Sam's 3 intercessors roll attacks against the Terminators as if it were the shooting phase. She must subtract 1 from her intercessor's hit roll, so she needs a 4+ instead of the standard 3+ for Space Marines. She gets 3 hits in total from the dice roll shown. Onto the next page, we get Death Guard stratagems. We get a huge one called Chaos Boon, and then 4 more on the next page. I'll go through the example that they give there as well, the Blight Bombardment. Now this one, oh my, it's deadly, potentially. So This stratagem allows a unit of Plague Marines to forgo shooting their guns in order to throw a barrage of Blight Grenades instead. Now, it says Plague Marines there, which it doesn't actually say in the stratagem itself. However, what it does say in the stratagem is every model in the unit that is equipped with a Blight Grenade. So, effectively, it is Death Guard Plague Marines and above, so Plague Marines and Death Guard characters and stuff like that. So you can't use this stratagem on Poxwalkers. Imagine using it on a unit of 20 Poxwalkers. But Big Mac, you've not explained it to us yet, so I better explain it, hadn't I? In the shooting phase, Max's Plague Marines are within 6 inches of Sam's unit of Intercessors. As they are within range of Blight Grenade, Max uses the Blight Bombardment stratagem. Max reduces his command points by 1. Usually, the Plague Marines would only be able to throw 1 grenade. Blight Bombardment allows them to throw 1 Blight Grenade each. So if you've got a unit of 10 Plague Marines, you throw in 10 Blight Grenades. What's good about a Blight Grenade though? Well, a Blight Grenade gets D6 attacks. So if you throw in 10 and you rolled, somehow, you rolled 10 sixes, then you get 60 attacks. You're not likely to roll that. You're more likely to roll, for every 2 dice, you're likely to roll 7. For every 2 dice, a 4 and a 3, or a 2 and a 1, a 2 and a 1, a 2 and a 2 and a 5, or a 1 and a 6. You're likely to roll 7 for every 2 dice you throw. But anyway, in this example, Max rolls a d6 for each Blight Grenade to see how many attack rolls he will need to make. He then moves on to resolving the attacks, rolling to hit and to wound as normal. In this example, he rolls 2 2s, a 3, a 4 and a 6. Giving him a total of 17, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 17 attacks. If for example, those 5 Plague Marines just had bolters, then they would be getting a total of 10 attacks instead of 17. Now, I'm not sure what a Blight Grenade is. The strength of a Blight Grenade is it 3 or is it 4? But I think it being a Blight weapon, you'll be able to re-roll ones of the to wound roll. So there's pluses and minuses if it is a weaker strength than a bolt gun. On to the next page, we get Mission Briefing, Wasteland Ambush. The Ultramarines are making their way back to Barachius. Barachius is being fortified effectively by the Ultramarines, and they're trying to fall back to a more easily defensible area. So they're trying to make their way back across the plains to Barachius, but the problem is they've had to lay down a temporary roadway, and unfortunately it's near some foothills of the mountains, and the Death Guard are hiding in the foothills waiting to ambush them. So, on to the next page, we get Convoy Ambush. The Death Guard have prepared a deadly trap for the Ultramarines and are lying in wait for the passing convoy. They hope to catch the enemy unawares and destroy them utterly before they can escape or call for reinforcements to mount a counter-attack. You roll off, and starting with the winner, take turns placing the battle mats in the layout shown above, so it's your typical 3 side by side by side. Set up the terrain in an agreed manner. The Death Guard deployment zone should have lots of terrain features. The Space Marine player must move their units off the battlefield edge labelled escape route. Now the escape route is through the Death Guard deployment zone. The Death Guard have got a massive deployment zone as well. So they've got a 17-inch deployment zone, but then not only that, they've got either side of the battlefield up to halfway across the central battle map, they've got a 6-inch deployment zone. The Space Marines have a 12-inch deployment zone across the centre of their battle map that they deploy on. So it's going to be a tricky one for the Space Marines. However, they don't have to get all the units off the battlefield edge. We'll get to that in a second though. Both players must create a battle-forged army, maximum power rating 50. So I think this is the biggest battle we've had in terms of power rating. 50 is roughly, translated into points, is roughly 1,000 points typically. Might be a little higher or a little lower depending on what equipment your guys have got, guys or girls. And then on to deployment. Both players' deployment zones are shown on the map above. Both players roll off. The winner can decide who deploys first. So if you're the Space Marine player and you want to see where your Death Guard's most dangerous units are going, maybe you'll let the Death Guard player go first. Players then alternate deploying their units, beginning with the player chosen to deploy first. The Death Guard player has the first turn. So there's no real advantage to the Space Marine player deploying first because he's not going to get the first turn. Victory conditions. Space Marine units that move off the battlefield have escaped, even if only a single model moved off the battle map. So if you've got a unit of 3 intercessors, you just need to move one of them off and they're considered to have escaped the battlefield. At the end of the battle, the Space Marine player adds up the power level of the escaped units. If this total is 15 or more, the Space Marine player is victorious. Any other result is a victory for the Death Guard. So you've only got to get just under a third of your warriors off the edge of the battlefield through the Death Guard deployment zone. What I'd suggest is just plough straight into the centre of the Death Guard lines and do your best to tie up units and work your way around them with other units. The Death Guard player could be like really tricky though and string the units out across the battlefield, wave after wave, like line after line. Depending on how many units they can get, if they take a unit of 20 Poxwalkers, let's say, and the 10 cultists, they can probably, basically, with the 20 Poxwalkers, I reckon, spreading them out to the maximum distance they can be and still be in formation, I reckon they could probably basically cordon off the whole battlefield. So there's some interesting tactics to be played here. And then the game lasts 6 battle rounds, which is the longest battle we've had, I think, so far. I think previously we've only had up to 5 battle rounds. Anyway, on to the next page. The next page, you say, there's not normally a page after that. Well, the inside of the back cover has a little treat for us. Take your game to the next level. It's an advert from Games Workshop. I can't remember if the last issue had it in, but it gives you a selection of ways to take your game to the next level. You can get the Warhammer 40,000 rulebook, Codex Space Marines, Codex Ultramarines, or Codex Death Guard. Onto the final page. What are we getting in next week's issue? You may remember it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Death Guard Tallyman. The Death Guard Tallyman always counts to 7, apparently. I stupidly should have known that last week when I did my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I cut myself off at 5 or 6, I can't remember. Yeah, so the Death Guard's Nurgle's magical number is 7. And Death Guard worshipping Nurgle and being linked to Nurgle, the patron god of the Death Guard is Nurgle. Of course, the Tallyman's always going to count to 7. What do we get in the following week's issue, issue 75? Well, we get part 1 of 4 magazines containing some repulsor parts. So it's the first part of the repulsor kit we're going to get, and no doubt we'll get a lot of information about the repulsors in there, as well as the Inari and relics for your games. So, I think that's all I've got for you now, guys. Thanks very much for watching. Please do check out the link below to my Patreon and consider pledging if you like the channel. You can pledge for as little as $1 a month. And if you really want Mortal Realms content, you can pledge for $1 a month. If I can get 24 people pledging, well, actually, it'd be more like 35 people pledging. If I can get 35 people pledging $1 a month, then I can probably cover Mortal Realms, because I'm happy to pay for 1 magazine a month myself, but I don't want to be paying for 4. Thanks very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the battlefield.